What's up, guys? My name is Nate Hibbert. Thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about FPV drone flying. I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit about what I've learned so far in the first 6 weeks of being inside of the FPV drone flying space, and just trying to share my experience, and tonight go over some of the high points that I've hit in the first 6 weeks of being inside of the FPV drone world. I still hesitate to call myself an FPV drone pilot, but just trying to share my journey and the things that I've learned this far. So the first thing I want to do is show you guys the gear that I have acquired, or rather just explain what FPV drone flying is. Usually when you probably have heard about drone flying, it's probably underneath the company DJI, which they are more on the GPS based drones. So drones that kind of auto level themselves, and not to completely make it sound unskillful, but the drones kind of fly themselves and you're just suggesting which area they should go in. FPV drone is the kind of the opposite side of that, where you are in full control of, it can be a tiny little drone like this or something that's bigger, 5 to 7 inches, and you're doing everything for this drone. There are assisted flight modes which will auto level itself, but for the most part you are telling the drone everything it needs to know. So how much throttle to go up in the air and actually stay level, the pitch, the roll, all that kind of stuff. You are using this type of controller. Let me unplug it. To tell the drone exactly what to do. So it kind of looks like a PlayStation controller. If you played any video games, this probably looks pretty familiar, but the joysticks work a little bit differently, where this one will kind of hold its place up and down, but left and right it will recenter itself, and then this stick over here just recenters itself regardless of where you push it. So it's a little bit different. It's got some hardware switches up here on the top. So yeah, a little bit different than a PlayStation controller, but the layout is pretty much the same. And so that's the basic, very, very basic FPV drone controller. They get a lot crazier than this, but this was $40, so it's pretty basic. That's how my setup is because I'm just getting into this. Same thing with this drone. This drone was less than $100, but it is a way that I'm getting into this to see if I like it and to see if I can actually gain the skills I need to keep these little drones in the air, which has been quite the adventure. So the last part of the FPV and where the FPV name come from, actually paired on top of this drone, there's actually this little camera that you can see, that little camera lens there, and that pairs up with this. Let me actually find the channel, but that pairs up with these goggles. So this goggle headset, when it's put together, it goes like this. You strap it on your head, but the reason I like this goggle is because I can actually take it off and share the video feed. So once I actually find the channel that this is putting out, hopefully it shows exactly what this drone is looking at. So right now you can see my computer setup, and as it's flying around, you're getting the perspective of this little drone. So FPV stands for first person view, and that's what this first person view drone looks like when I'm flying it around. So I usually have this strapped to my face, so I'm not actually looking at the drone as it's flying around in the world. I'm looking at the camera in front of it. So yeah, that's the basics of what FPV drone is, and the reason that I liked it, or I started getting interested in it, is just because I'm trying to translate some of my computer skills to real world things. So I started with a 3D printer, which I have over here to my left hand side. Actually, I lie. I started building my own computer kind of at the beginning of the pandemic when I was stuck inside so much. I was like, man, I'm spending so much time on this computer. I, one, might as well upgrade my computer since I'm spending so much time on it, and two, might as well take some of my skills and interest in things that I'm doing and try to make it real world things and not just completely software oriented. So I built my own computer. That was my first step into more hardware things, and then I got a 3D printer, which has been fun. And if you guys have watched videos on the channel, you've seen I've done a lot of printing of different objects. This is the latest thing that I'm working on, which is shift knobs, and actually modeling these for myself and then printing them and having them in the real world is a really cool experience. And now I'm getting into these little tiny tiny drones, which is a little bit more complicated than the 3D printer. And yeah, just a lot of fun, and something that I saw on Instagram. Not gonna lie, that's like where I first kind of saw this type of flying, and I was like, that'd be interesting to look at. And the more and more I learned about it, the more and more I felt that I just had to get into it. So that's where we're at today. Yeah, and it's been about 6 weeks, so I'm just trying to share my journey. I'm not an expert at this for sure. I still don't know the name of half of the things on my drone or that's going on in the world of droning, but I'm just trying to share my knowledge from the position that I'm at. And I think, as someone who's starting and trying to commit a certain amount of time to this, like a couple hours per week, I think that there's a lot of lessons that I'm learning, and I just want to share those lessons. So if anyone else wants to get into this, or if you're like intimidated by it, you can see that there are paths that you can take to learn how to fly FPV drones, and that you don't have to be like super skilled right out the gate, because as we'll show tonight, some of my first flights are very embarrassing, as in I only flew for like half a second, but as I've just continued to try and fly for at least an hour a week, I have gotten considerably better, but still not good. So that's where we're at tonight. So yeah, that's kind of what FPV drone flying is, why I'm jumping into it now. I do actually want to show you guys my first flight. I have my brother on the line, so I'm going to bring him in a second. We're going to look at some of my like quote unquote best of moments flying FPV, but I want to show you guys this first flight that I ever took to kind of build on this, like anybody can get into this and try this out mindset. So you don't have to be an expert, and hopefully if you can laugh and giggle at my flying, it will at least encourage you that you can do this by yourself. So let me go ahead and pull this up. Screen cap. Here we go. Oh, you guys don't want to see OBS. Bring this over here, make this full screen. All right. So this is my very first time, and I'm going to do a proper YouTube video on this, but this is my very first time actually getting the drone to arm. You can see I'm just here in my bedroom, and yeah, I've got the fan going, lots of things that I learned from this, but I was trying to like record my whole experience, so I have some of this footage I need to share with you guys. But yeah, I get up in the air and then immediately crash. So yeah, the bar is set pretty low if you're considering getting into this hobby or sport or whatever you want to call it. Like the first flight does not have to be pretty at all. This is basically just a gear check. You can see I have that controller in my hand. I have the headset on my face. And this is the tiny little drone that I have at the time to start. And again, I just like went straight up in the air and fell because I had no idea what I was doing. And I counted this as like a huge win for me. Getting into droning was kind of intimidating because there wasn't a direct path that you take. There are what they call RTF, or like ready to fly bundles, where you get the controller, you get the headset and the drone. But I had a unique experience to buy my very first drone, this little guy, the Acro B, from Mr. Steele, who's one of the bigger names in the community. So I took that opportunity, bought this drone, but that meant that I had to go out and find my own controller and my own headset and kind of piece this thing together. So the reason I said that that was a win was because I didn't even know if all of these pieces were going to work together. I had done my research and I had put my best foot forward trying to learn all this stuff, but it wasn't a guarantee that I was just going to be able to turn this on. Oh, sorry about that. And that this was all going to work. So that's why I counted that as just a huge win for myself. If we watch a little bit more of this first time I flew, you can pick it up. I have to figure out some stuff. I think I didn't put the antennas on top of my headset, so I actually go ahead and do that. Yeah, you can see I'm screwing them in, and then I go for the second flight. I don't think the antennas changed anything, to be 100% honest with you, but I was just like, oh yeah, this is one more piece I forgot to put together the puzzle because I was just excited to get up and fly. And then this is my second flight, so I get it to hover a little bit, I gun it, I get scared of hitting the fan, and actually the air from the fan pushed me down into the ground. So being able to fly in a straight line, this was this is, I don't know if this is the moment that like completely hooked me, but this definitely got me excited that I had the tools to go out and learn how to do this a little bit more. So those two crashes were the beginning of my FPV drone flying career, and I was extremely happy. I'm still looking back. I know this is only like 6 weeks ago, but it feels a little nostalgic looking back, like, oh my gosh, I really didn't know anything. But it was just so exciting to know that like these pieces of the puzzle that I got actually fit together. So with that intro now done, I'm going to pull in my brother. And like I said, we're going to... I guess he can ask me some questions if I left some things out, but also I just want to go over what I'm going to call like the best of my first 6 weeks of flying FPV drone. I don't think they're going to impress anybody. Again, this is not to show like, oh, look how good I am at this. This is to show kind of the progression that's happened. And I guess Steven can keep me honest or tell me like if you're actually seeing progression in these clips, or if they all kind of look the same and I'm still just as crummy of a pilot as when I started. All right, Steve, you ready? Shaking his head. All right, let's bring in my brother. So this is my brother, Steven Hibbert, the person who has kept the battery in my back for the last 7 years. The man does not stop with ideas and just constantly encouraging
battery
me.
in the back is better than foot and ass.
Try to be PC, but you know, about the same.
Oh, sorry.
No, but yeah, you've highly encouraged me to just tackle these new things, and with anything that I like to tackle, I'm like, I'm willing to do this, but you gotta help me. So that's why I constantly just pull on my brother to get in here. So you listened to that 10-minute intro. How do you think I did? Did I leave anything out? Anything that you would add or questions you have after listening to that?
No, it was good. It was a lot of information. I wish there was like a little bit more of a setup and story. You just kind of like mashed everything together, but I think if you're trying to make this your first podcast, it's a good way of doing it. It's just like kind of throw everything in there.
Yeah, not trying to bore people, give them too much to think about, but give them a basic view of who I am and why I'm doing this craziness.
Yeah, it's hard to tell like how you did right now, but I'm sure I'll go back and watch it and break it down and give you a 10-page how we could have done better.
Cool. All right, well, dope. If you don't have any questions or feel like I left anything out, then we can go ahead and jump into some of these. I know it's going to be a bit delayed for you, so that is a little sucky, but we'll keep figuring out how to do this podcasting thing. So screen cap with you, so your face is on here. So that first clip that I showed was the 2 crashes, and then this was the best of that night. So I must have had, I think the last piece of the puzzle that I got when I could actually fly was the batteries and the battery charger. I don't even remember.
You know what would be extremely helpful
as
a visual standpoint is like a timeline, maybe down at the bottom, or if you could just bring in a timeline and just like let me know where. Like, when did you get it? What was the date? When did you meet Mr. Steele? When did you make your first flight? Like, just give me a timeline of these things. Because I hear you say them, and I'm piecing it together because you're my brother, but it's very difficult, I think, just from a straight audio perspective to go, like, how far out are these dates? Like, you're saying these are your first flights, but how far into, like, getting your equipment?
Yeah, I kind of labeled them what week they are. That's how I know I've been doing this for, like, 6-7 weeks. So I can say that at the beginning of each clip. But so this first clip, just so you guys know, was I actually got these batteries that I have, which we'll link to everything that I've bought so far in the description below. But I was able to get the batteries, but I didn't have a charger for the batteries because I didn't think about buying a charger for the batteries. So this first flight that I ever had, actually, if you look back, and I can show it again, if you look back at what's called the on-screen display, which I was calling a HUD, so that was another learning point that I just had. You can see that these batteries are at 3.7 volts when it's just sitting still. Oh, that's a bad place to pause. And 3.6 volts as soon as I start flying, which is basically dead. So they weren't charged at all. So I don't know if that affected my flying. It's really hard to tell because I was only in the air for half a second, so I don't think it made that big of a difference. But just something, another like little funny learning point of just like, I didn't even know that I had to buy a charger separately, and I wasn't patient enough to even wait for that charger to get there. I just wanted to like try flying. So that's kind of the level that I was at, just to paint a little bit clearer of a picture. All right.
Yeah, something if when you have more viewers and people in the chat more is just like asking how long they've been flying and how confident they are. Because I think this is as you're learning and bringing people along your journey, just hearing other people and kind of having them sound off, like how long have you been flying? How comfortable do you feel? Basic movements, acrobatic movements, what'd you call it? Like tricks or?
Yeah, the tricks. That's something It's something I'm dabbling in. Me and Steve will talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, that's the area that I'm looking at getting into next.
I didn't mean to take you off. I apologize. Just attempting to think through this process.
All right, so let's show this. This is the best of that first night that I was flying with the dead batteries and just getting everything going on. And this is not impressive at all. So, but this is what I was hyped up on. So this is actually. So my goal for the whole night was just to fly from this little ottoman to the bed, which is probably, I don't know, like 15 feet in a straight line. Like that's all I wanted to accomplish on the very first time trying to fly a drone. And you can see I'm veering to the left and the right. I almost hit Kate, my wife, who's filming this from a third-person view. And then I hit the bed, but I don't actually land on it. And that was the best that it got out of all the footage that we had, was like that 3 seconds of flying. So again, just to paint the picture, like I knew absolutely nothing. I was just hyped that this thing was actually flying. So being able to somewhat fly in a straight line and not like smash it into the ceiling was a win for me. So anything you have to say about that one? I don't think there's much to commentate on there. But again,
no, I think just that first attempt of just like you've played around in a simulator, you had the thing in real life. It was very different than the simulator, and then being able to just feel like you accomplished something. But I think this is another like aspect of this podcast that I'd like you to get a lot more into, is just like you're constantly learning through challenges. I think that should be like something that you build upon consistently, is like you didn't just like open up the box and were like, I'm just gonna play around. It's like you had an idea. Hey, I'm just trying to go from this ottoman to the bed. This is my challenge. Like you should lean into that a lot more. It's just like, this is what my challenge was for this day. Did I accomplish it? How did I feel about it? Did I fail? Why do I think I failed? And just your opinion and viewpoint on your experience of challenging yourself. I think it's something that a lot of people do, but maybe not verbalize. But I know it's something especially that you do, and you always set like a high bar and then are able to like work backwards and then challenge yourself to learn more efficiently moving forward, instead of just like, I'm going to turn this thing on every day for 5 hours. It's like you have a more precise goal, work towards that goal, and then break down anywhere where it's maybe not as efficient use of your time. And I think that's what I've always enjoyed about you, is like finding a way to learn, the most efficient way to learn. Even when this is far left field, but drive me to the airport and you were talking about your art. It's like you weren't trying to recreate anything. You were just trying to, what's the quickest way to make this shirt? What's the quickest way to do this design? What's the quickest way to help this client? It was just like, that speed of learning and then building it in is what I think your unique value prop is, in just aiding other people. Is just like thinking different of not how do I become an expert, but what's the quickest way to learn to enjoy myself doing this thing.
Yeah. This is definitely a bigger conversation. That's something I've been thinking about a lot. Like why I like picking up these hobbies, and like when I get to a certain point, why do I feel like it's just like good enough until I'm gonna like have to teach somebody, which is that's an interesting thing that's kind of connecting in my head right now. But like Photoshop, like I learned Photoshop well enough to use it, and then when I started teaching Photoshop, I definitely had to dig down like a couple levels deeper to like know the name of all the tools and to be able to like slowly walk someone through this process. And really know it at a much deeper level. But that didn't necessarily mean like getting better at the tool. It was just having the understanding a little bit deeper. But this is completely left side.
That's on me. I'll try to be quiet. I apologize.
No, but I think to paint a like fuller picture of like me and why like on this channel you're gonna see 3D printing and drones and possibly computer building and other software stuff. It's like that's just how my brain works. Is like I just like to know a lot about a bunch of little things, but only to like a certain level. Like I don't think I'll ever be a master like FPV drone pilot, but I want to be like good enough that it's a tool that I can use to either build relationship or to help someone in business or whatever else. So I don't have a clear goal of what I'm trying to do with this FPV stuff, but I know learning it is going to open up doors, or at least open up opportunities that I see to use a tool like this. And I think it's a really good pairing of one, the video games, because I've been playing video games all my life, and the controller is very much like a PlayStation or Xbox controller, but also like the computer side of things, and now learning how to learning all the little parts of the drone, which is something I'm going to talk a little bit about, just some more knowledge that I'm gaining. And yeah, just like the software side of the things, I've tried to crack this thing open this week with the software and learn some lessons there. So just a lot of learning that's going on in areas that I'm interested in. So it keeps me going. But
would you say part of the learning process is to help and teach people?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, you probably even learn that in school. Like the best way to learn something is to teach it.
To teach something.
Yeah. So I definitely
so it's almost like a circle. Like you like learning things because you like helping people and you like to teach, and then teaching helps you learn, and that's just like you get better. I think that's another piece of like why you learn so rapidly is because you're attempting to like learn it to the point where teaching somebody or at least helping somebody with it and then lock that in. Again, that's maybe a bigger discussion, but I do think that's what this podcast is. It's not necessarily like a drone podcast, but it's like a Nathaniel learning, teaching podcast. And I think the challenges pieces of it is the piece that I am most excited about, because I think that I've identified that in you is like why one of the reasons that you learn so fast is you're challenging yourself, and not only just challenging yourself, like evaluating yourself on that challenge. And then like, was that challenge too lofty? Was that challenge too small? How do I ramp this up and like learn more efficiently moving forward?
No, thanks for bringing it full circle. I know we went deep down a rabbit hole right there. But to bring it back to those challenges, like I think that is the way that I'm wired, and I'll show some of these clips, but just to give some context to some of these clips, like the clips or the time flying that I learned the most and like got the most confidence was I was just like going out with zero goal in mind. And it was just like, I just need to do this thing and have fun. I think I was like putting too much pressure on myself, and we can talk about like some of the goals that I set. Like the first thing I ever wanted to do was just like be able to hover in place. Because like I said, coming from, if you hear droning and you hear any company associated with droning, you're probably hearing DJI, which again, those are those GPS drones that basically can sit in one spot perfectly all by themselves because the computer's doing all the flying for you, or 95% of the flying for you. And so I wanted to be able to replicate that, which it's kind of silly. Like if that's what I want to do, I should just go buy a DJI drone, right? But also I didn't understand like that's a very high level, not a very high level, but definitely not like first day drone flying, and still something that I can't do 6 weeks in, like hold it perfectly steady. I've gotten much better, but to be able to hold a drone like perfectly steady does take some skill. So to think that I'm just gonna like for the first time arm the drone and get it in the air and hold it perfectly steady, like I didn't realize that that's probably a much harder task than just being able to fly in a straight line. And I didn't realize that flying in a straight line inside your house is even harder than just going to the park, being able to get the thing 40, 50 feet in the air and then flying in a straight line. Like that's actually way easier. And one of the clips that I have here that I'm going to show towards the end is actually Steven's first flight, because he was here in Atlanta, Georgia with me for the weekend. And yeah, I think his first flight was more impressive than mine, even though we essentially kind of did the same thing. He just had way more space because we were outside. Yeah. So yeah, just learning all those things, but not to
I just want to stop you for 1 second. I think challenging yourself with the ottoman to the bed made you realize you need more space, and then teaching me, it like leveled me up to learn much faster. But you said like you learn most from just going out and having fun. I think that was another challenge to yourself, because you were trying to challenge yourself at too high of a level and you lost the fun. Right. So going out to like, okay, I'm going to challenge myself
appropriately just to have fun. Set. Yeah. No, that's very true.
I think that's my role in this podcast. Is just like bring the challenge aspect hard.
I was fighting you on it a little bit, but I think you're right. I think I set the bar too high. So if the bar that I set for the first time ever flying a drone, like I would have said like first time ever flying, probably go outside. And the second, like the only aim that you should have is to just keep it in the air for 10 seconds, then 30 seconds, then a minute.
Regardless if it's upside down.
Yeah, like You can start the stopwatch, and as soon as it hits the ground, you can stop. But spiraling towards the ground, you can count that. That's fine. But yeah, I think I set the bar just too high because I was just so ignorant. And I had, like you said, I had played the simulator before. But even now that I go back and play the simulator, I'm like, oh, the graphics, or the, not the graphics, the gravity is not even realistic. Like, I can go throttle up and then turn it off and just float for like 30 seconds as I come back down to the ground. Like, that's not how it is in real life. So like, even, you know, the context that I had learning how to fly an FPV drone, didn't translate well because I wasn't practicing well. So yeah, I think, you know, after I kind of get some more time flying drones and get a little bit more comfortable, I think putting together like a series of videos showing this is the way that I got into FPV drones. There's a million ways to do it, but for me, this made the most sense. Or, you know, here are the lessons that I learned. Don't follow what I did because it was actually a horrible idea. But those types of challenges, I think, regardless of how you're getting into this hobby, would probably be a good thing to have. Like, even just knowing that, like, the first time you ever go flying, go outside, try to just keep it in the air for 10 seconds, and then land it without breaking it. Keep it in the air for 30 seconds. Same thing, don't break it. And then a minute, like, because I think that was something that like clicked in my head once I was able to keep the drone in the air for a whole minute. I was like, oh yeah, my confidence is way higher. Like, now let's start trying to do some different maneuvers and stuff. So
yeah, would you say your enjoyment of it went up higher too after just like getting it to stay in the air?
I would say yes. I think yeah, I don't know how to like quantify like fun. I guess.
I got you. So I guess maybe I'll come at it from a different angle. You had the drone. Did you at any point feel overwhelmed or frustrated? And did that overwhelm or frustration or whatever you want to call that feeling cause you to just change how you were challenging yourself, and to the point where it's just like, my challenge to myself is keep it in the air?
Yeah, I don't think it was frustration or whatever the other word you used was.
Overwhelm.
I think it was like trying to be money conscious, maybe. Like, I just don't want to break this thing immediately because that's going to kill like all fun, right? Like, at least if I'm able to like play with my new drone, then I'll be enjoying it. But if I break
keeping it in the air wasn't necessarily like the goal for a fun. It was just like, if I keep it in the air, it's less time that it's falling and possibly breaking. Is essentially what you're thinking. Yeah,
it was more of a confidence thing.
Okay.
At that point. Like, the first couple of flights, like when I started flying in my backyard, I was like, oh yeah, like this is actually enough room to fly this little drone around. And then I was in the air for a whole minute. I was like, my confidence, that's the word I kept saying. I was like, my confidence is way higher now. So I can actually like feel like I can push the limits a little bit more, and know that I'm not going to just immediately crash it and break it. And maybe my confidence was even built from crashing it as much as I did and seeing that it didn't just completely fall apart. But those are interesting things to think about. All right. If the line of questioning is done, I will move on.
Well, I think it's just eye-opening to me to see like, oh, this podcast is kind of starting through drones, but it's really like, this is your MO. Like, you pick up new things. This is more of a hobby than like business, but you challenge yourself to get better at the thing to learn, then you're teaching other people. Like, that's like checking boxes for me to go, oh, this podcast is not necessarily like just drone podcast. It's whatever you're into, but just the, I think, piece that people are going to attach to is like the learning process and you bringing them inside your learning process. But I think the challenge piece is where people are really going to be able to like align themselves with you. Like, oh, I am also getting into this. I'm also new. He's challenging himself to do this. I could also challenge myself to do this. Right. I was trying to go in the house and fly it inside. Oh, I didn't realize like outside is even easier because I don't have to be so picky with the throttle. I can kind of keep.
You're not going to be knocking your wife's pictures off the wall.
Do you have that video?
I don't have it pulled up, but I can pull it up. We'll keep that as a special bonus at the end.
But I think this is what it is. Like, you're learning through challenges and bringing people alongside you as you learn so that you can help and teach more people.
Right. Yeah, I think... not to get too meta, but even like the live stream, it feels like I can be a lot more casual here. And then like when it gets put into a YouTube video, I want that content to like be a little bit more useful than these live streams where I'm just kind of like babbling and stumbling my way through learning this
raw
thing.
thoughts versus like the video is the teaching
Yeah,
side
so
of it.
even that conversation we just had, like I almost feel like that could be a YouTube video where it's just like, here are my thoughts on it. But I definitely think like once we figure out like the challenges and like once I think about like what challenges would have been helpful at which stages that I'm flying to start, I think putting that out as like a video that people could watch in 5 to 10 minutes would be
just like a little checklist, like
right.
a pre-flight checklist. That
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I said. Not to get too meta about like we're in a live stream, we're talking about live streams, but that's kind of why I'm doing content on this page this way. It just for me feels a lot less like I'm putting this information out there like someone should go try it, and you guys can see clearly this person who's been flying for 6 weeks knows very little. So don't feel like if you're gonna get into drone flying, like I should be the only person you're checking in with. Like probably go do some other research as well. I'm having success and I'm having a lot of fun. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments down below or find me on Instagram and shoot me a message. But know that I'm doing that as much as you probably are. Like I'm going and finding people to ask questions to. I have some good friends now on Instagram that I'm like constantly messaging back and forth about the hobby. I'm in certain people's discords and doing all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm trying to learn and get better week by week, as probably some of the people who will watch this in future are doing as well. So that's where we're at. All right, let's show one more clip and then we can get on another 20-minute rabbit trail. Screen cap. All right, so to set this clip up, put it in the name of the file. I think this, yeah. So this was my second week of flying. This was actually the first time I had flown outside. So inside was the first week. This is the second time I've flown, and I decided to go to a park that was next to our house. And I was like, maybe open space will be better and less chance of breaking things inside my house. Because it is a little drone, but even throwing this thing around in your house can cause a little bit of damage. So until I got some control of it, I wanted to take it outside. So first thing I can show you guys is that the batteries are actually charged. My charger came in. So you can see the batteries are at 4.2 volts, which is good. So I go straight up in the air. And so, yeah, remember, this is the best of clip. So this is not the first clip that I had from this week. This was after, I think this is the very last battery that I had actually, which is maybe something interesting to track for my sessions. But this was me doing what I called there and back. So me and Steven had talked about like I should be challenging myself to do some type of maneuver in the air, and I came up with just being able to go to one point and come back from that point. And so I called it a there and back. Not too impressive with the naming, but I was actually, this was like the most control of the drone that I felt that I had in the second week. And the next thing that I want to point out is just see how much higher off the ground I am compared to being in my house. I mean, that's a full-size picnic table. It's pretty small there on the ground. This is a telephone pole, so I don't know how high those are, but like 30-40 feet in the air probably here. It's just a lot easier to fly up here because you have time to catch yourself. Like as you can see when I'm taking off here, I like bobble it a little bit and I'm able to catch myself and level out the horizon and get back up in the air. So this is being able to go out to this picnic table. I know that I was trying to land here, but even my landing 6 weeks in is pretty poor. So I was just like, all right, let me just stay up in the air, go from one picnic table, kind of turn around very sloppily, and then get to the second picnic table and just go back and forth a couple of times. I was kind of working on my turning, but I don't think I was like consciously thinking about what I was doing too much here. It was just like, oh, I'm actually flying this thing, and I'm being able to keep it in the air, which this is the longest time that I was in the air as well. And I probably could have been in the air a little bit longer, but as soon as I saw this person, I was just like, I really don't want to hit a stranger with my drone. So I just kind of dive bombed it in the ground. But yeah, that was the best of my second week of flying. It's very high up in the air. It's very sloppy turning, but it was a huge step in the right direction for my confidence and for, actual flying in the real world, knowing that at least my understanding of how the controllers or how the controls for flying an FPV drone work that I learned from a simulator are translating to the real world. So I'm not like getting confused on how to throttle up or how to turn or any of that kind of stuff. It's just not smooth because I don't have the practice.
Do you have the ability to put marks on the screen, like a red line or anything?
Not at the second, but that's definitely something I could figure out for future.
I could see the mouse, but it'd be so much easier if you could like highlight or circle.
Yeah.
Like that person that you were talking about, like I think because I saw this clip a few times, I knew that he was off to the right by the fence, but circling that person would have made it so much easier to follow.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. We can figure that out. So yeah, I dump it in the grass, I disarm it, which that was something that, again, from all the research that I had done, I knew that the highest risk of breaking this drone, which these propellers are pretty gnarly as I'm looking at this and about to say this, but the highest risk of breaking the drone is landing it in tall grass and then having that motor get caught on a piece of grass. So I was actually pretty diligent about when I'm crashing, I just need to disarm it, making sure that there's no current getting put to those motors at all. So you can see, like, even before it's fully crashed, I disarmed it and made it land. So I think that's part of the reason that I've been able to not burn out motors quite yet. I've heard a couple of people who have gotten these drones and like within the week they've burned out drone motors. They could be flying way harder than I am. They're probably people who have more experience and they're just reviewing this drone. But just putting that out there, if you're learning to fly, it's usually a good idea to just disarm as soon as possible. Any notes, thoughts, questions, concerns?
No, just a lot of good information. I think this is what I enjoy about when you're learning something, like just being able to talk to you about what you're learning.
Yeah, so this is definitely like a long form way of just getting random tips, but I think compiling these over time will be helpful. All right, so this is the next one, week 4. So if the last clip was week 2, I didn't have any like good clips from week 3. Maybe I didn't get to fly. I don't remember exactly. But this is week 4. The first time I got to fly in the backyard, I was just out there like cleaning up, and I was like, you know what? I think this is actually enough room to fly out here. So let me try it. And again, remember, this is the best clip that I had from that day. So not very impressive, but again, I was just practicing going out to a certain point in the yard, turning around, and then trying to land on this little, it's like a footstool that I'm taking off from that we just leave outside. So it's pretty grody, but that's what I was taking off from. You can see, again, I'm trying to point out like the progression and the things that I'm finding impressive going back and watching these is like my takeoff is a lot smoother and it's a lot more controlled. So the takeoff in the last clip, I like shoot like 20 feet up in the air. I'm like kind of bobbling it, what I coined as like Bambi flying, when it's just like very unstable trying to find the level horizon. This one I have a lot more confidence just like popping it up 3-4 feet and then kind of getting moving forward and not being super destabilized or whatever. So I pop up a couple of feet, just high enough for me to kind of clear things, and then I get out just to a random point in the yard, turn around, and then try to come back to where I was sitting, and I missed the landing. So like I said, my landing is still not very good, but just this attempt, this was just my confidence going like way, way, way up. Being able to not Bambi fly too much, be able to turn like pretty sharp and get right back to where I just was. Those are all like really good signs for me. And again, just the confidence thing. That's why I keep saying that. Like if we were to go back and set challenges for ourselves, like the first 10 challenges would just be like, get your confidence up, get to know your drone, know that if you throw it around, if it's one of these little bee brains, like you're not going to break it instantly. You can see like, probably on a bigger drone, well, I don't know, that's not that high. I think I disarm at like my knee. So that's only like 1.5 feet of free falling onto grass, which is pretty soft. So I probably wouldn't break anything. But if this is a heavier, a little bit more delicate drone, and I turn off, if I disarm it from here and I'm not actually over what I thought I was over and I just hit the ground, there's probably a higher chance that I could break something. Let me say it like that. Any thoughts? I'm actually starting to lose my voice.
No, just I'm making a note though, because I think the pre-flight or the checklist or whatever is these rants, I guess what you're doing is just like talking through it. I think this is how you develop this checklist. Is like not only did you do it and take like your thoughts when you were doing it, is like going back again and looking back over it and how you feel about it and what would you do differently or change, and then you can like refine your checklist. So I almost feel like you should have a checklist now and then just like continue to change it as you learn more. Like from somebody that's 6 week in, what is your checklist right now?
Oh, I see.
And then
so not waiting until like I
no,
feel like
because I feel like
in.
all of these pieces are going to be missed. Like, what are the chances we're going to go back and listen to that clip that you just said and go, oh, this should be the first part of your checklist?
That's true. I could start doing that. Yeah,
exactly. And I think this is another piece that like people could follow along with, is like download the PDF and you have this, and then every time you update it, you can just let people know I've updated a PDF if you want to see it. It's just a free download for people, so they can just get it and look at it from somebody that's brand new, just learning. Because I feel in 6 months you'll be like, oh, you're not gonna remember any of this. So to like create a PDF or a checklist in 6 months, you're gonna be like, learn to fly. Like it's just like one box. But it needs to be broken down into all of these things, like confidence, challenge yourself, have small challenges, fly outside. Like all of these are good things to think about as you're just getting started, and you should write them down now because you're just getting started. You're not gonna remember this in a year.
Right. No, it's true. Those are good points. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Just something I will do. All right. Let's keep this rolling. So this is the next clip. Same week 4. So this was actually from the same day I was flying out there. And this is the first time I did a flip. So again, with the confidence building, I was like, okay, I'm able to get this thing up in the air. I'm able to hold it at a certain elevation. What can I do in this small of a space? I wasn't confident enough at this time to like practice like better turning, because that's either crashing into the house, my neighbor's yards, or some trees in the woods, which I didn't want to do any of those 3 things. So I was like, all right, let me try to keep it still in one spot and just do some type of flip. And I think if this was, like Steven's saying, a better thought out and written down, I would have been a little bit quicker to do these things and probably would have saved some battery, thus actually making more of it. But I think like even this little loop that I just did, I didn't even talk about the flip, but even the little loop that I did after I did the flip, I think like just shows how much more control I have of this thing. Like I didn't hit the trees, I didn't go over the house, which I didn't want to do because if any reason it fell, I didn't want to climb on my roof and grab it. So like just being able to keep it in this little area was good. You can see the elevations kind of all over the place. I'm doing some of that Bambi flying that I was talking about, where the horizon's just switching from left to right. But yeah, that first flip I actually did. I forget exactly where it was. I think it's here. Yeah, so that first, it's actually a roll that I did left to right. Was able to catch the horizon, as they say. So I had it cockeyed one way, and then I flipped and had it cockeyed the other way. And then I was able to level out and kind of find that horizon. And then...
This is another reason why I think we should have a timeline. Because this should be like day X, hour, whatever of flight time. Like, not a benchmark, but I can't think of the word. I don't think I'm going to be able to figure out the word. But just you can make that as a note on your timeline. Like this is the first flip is at this moment. You know when you look at when you're in school and they have that timeline and it's like that history mark. What do they call that?
A timeline.
Moment in time. There's a word for it. I'm not going to remember it.
Yeah.
But you should have that. Like I flew today here for this long. I was keeping it up in the air this long. Like any benchmarks that you hit, essentially, just have those on your timeline.
It is actually
time-stamped.
Yeah, in the file itself, it has the date and the time.
I think just
and
the
everything.
Visual. I think that visual can go along.
Well,
with
just saying that the information is there, so we could make the visuals go along with it, which would be interesting.
Yeah, do you
I
have
should
that
be
labeled flip, first flip, or whatever the case may be?
I do, but I should have like how pilots keep a log. I should have a log, like a little notebook that I get, and just say, went out flying today, like how our uncle does it. I I don't think he like still puts notes in there, but you still have to track how many hours you're flying because the aircraft needs service after how many hours or whatever. So that would probably be something good to add.
Yeah, because I think this is like when people want to go back and go, what did Nathaniel do? How did he learn? Like, they don't want to go back and watch 20 hours. I mean, they might. You said you go back and listen to podcasts, but I don't. And I was just like, just give me the information. But if there was a way to go to just Nathaniel's website and go, here's what he learned in the last 5 years. Here are the big moments in history where it's like he finally was able to fly for 5 minutes. Let me watch that video. And it's just this. It's just like a 30-second clip. Oh, wow, okay, cool. And not only is it a 30-second clip, but it's just like you talking about it at that point. Not in a year, like your feelings of it, but your feelings of it right now. Like, then you could just clip this section and go, I'm going to add that to my timeline.
No, I mean, these are all good points. I'm glad that we're doing this because even that log, like, that seems so obvious. I wish I would have done that from day one. But again, being 6 weeks in and starting the log, I think is still a really
That's another thing that should go on your PDF. Make a log.
Right.
Get a logbook. Even if you have an app on your phone, just like use the Google Calendar or whatever. Just like something you can go back and look
Google
at.
Keeps. No, that's true. I think I like the idea of having an actual logbook, but Google Keeps is probably better overall. All right, so just to show this second flip here, so I do some Bambi flying, I do the little turnaround that I was talking about. I hit the ground and like recover, so I learned I could just like power through if I don't get the elevation that I'm needing while I'm either like turning or doing something. So that was another lesson.
You said previously you did not want to have power when you were hitting the ground because you damage the motors or burn up the motors. What was the difference here where you hit the ground and decided to power up instead of just disarming?
I mean, it wasn't intentional to hit the ground, but I was like, oh, I'm losing, I forget exactly where it's at, but I'm like, oh, I noticed that I was losing elevation, so I just like fully throttled up. And I mean, honestly, I hit the ground so quick that it wasn't like I wasn't expecting to hit the ground. I don't have very good like awareness of where I'm at elevation wise. Okay. So it was just like, I'm throttling up.
In hindsight, would you have just disarmed and let it be in the grass?
I think if you're trying to be the most safe, yeah, probably like if you're losing altitude like this and you know that you're going to hit the ground, disarm. I think if you have enough wherewithal to know that all that's about to happen, you're probably smart enough not to bounce off the ground. So it's probably not going to happen quite like this.
So your mental process was, I'm falling, I just need to power up. Hitting the ground was not even in the thought process of this.
No, I mean, you can see Keats over here laughing at me. She's like, you idiot, why did you bounce off the ground?
But you're still standing by, if you're going to be in tall grass, the better thing is to just disarm the motor to save up the motor.
In general, that's probably what I would always do. I have brushed motors, which burn out faster than brushless motors. Brushless motors, there's not as much parts that can break on it. There's a much more technical way of talking about that, but I don't even want to attempt. But I know the brushless motors don't have that problem, and there's a thing called turtle mode. So if you're upside down, you can actually flip it over, which I think this drone has, but because it has brushed motors, I don't want to use that mode in fear of burning things out. But the brushless motors, I think you can do that a little bit. You can do it without the risk of burning things out as easily.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, because it any of those, I don't know if it's hypocritical parts, but like anytime you give advice and then you're showing something very different.
I mean, I appreciate you calling me out, but yeah, that's what I was like, if I had the wherewithal to know that I'm about to bounce off the ground now, I would probably just kill the motor. But in that moment, you want to save
the drone and not burn out the batteries.
Right. I'm much more concerned about preserving this drone now than I am like pushing it, because I understand to like do the kind of stuff that I want to do, I probably need something that's more powerful than the current drone that I have.
I got you.
Yeah, so hold on, let me finish this clip and then we can keep talking. So the reason I like showing this is because I just did the roll and was able to like find horizon and kind of level out. But this was the first forward flip that I had ever done, so I didn't know like the feel of what a forward flip should feel like. If you watch, any drone footage that's out on the internet, probably besides my footage, because my footage sucks, you're going to see people who are very comfortable doing flips and rolls, and that comes with just knowing your setup. So having the same drone, having the same controller, and just knowing, like, if I hold forward on the right stick for a second and a half, that's a full rotation for my setup. For me, I had 0 baseline. So this first flip that I did, I actually over-rotate by almost 180 degrees exactly and just throw this thing into the ground. That's probably the most violent crash that I had to this point. So it was an attempt. It didn't go well. I wasn't able to like regain where horizon was. In my head, I actually like panicked. I was like, oh shoot, like to do the flip, I throttled up, so I'm going fast. I kill the throttle to do the flip, and then without thinking, when I was just done rotating, I throttled back up. So when I'm upside down here, I didn't realize, like, oh shoot, you're upside down, you should probably rotate some more. I just straight threw the throttle forward and just threw myself into the ground. So again, learning points, but that was...
But nothing broke?
Nothing broke.
Flight?
And that's why I think that's what I was saying. Some of my confidence came from I can really kind of throw this thing around and it's going to be able to handle itself, which that's what it's created for. It's called a newbie drone, the Acro B. But yeah, nothing broke and lessons were learned. But this whole flight that I had here was whatever. I started at 158 and it ends at like 230. So about 30 seconds of flight time. Like, that's something that at this point I was feeling very confident about. It wasn't like I was just kind of like baby stepping around. Like, this is actually me trying new things, bouncing off the ground, doing all that in 30 seconds of being up in the air. So I felt good about it. So this was best of week 2, keeping it moving, or is that week 4? That's best of week 4.
This is why you need a visual dialogue.
It's there. I just had to read it. So getting towards...
Like, this is week what? Week... No, I don't know what week this is. I think day count is better than week count.
Okay.
I know it might not be like consistent day count, but I do think day count is a lot easier to follow than week count.
Moving forward, I'll have a log and be able to track some of this stuff better. All right. So this was when Steven came up here. So this was at the weekend of week 6 for me. Not that that really means anything, but I had been flying a little bit longer. And Steven came to visit for the weekend up for a conference. And so we had some time to go to a park, and I just wanted to show him what I was learning. He actually brought a Tello drone that's made by DJI, which he gave me.
Oh, here's a hard push. We'll be in Michigan for my birthday. So I gave you a present not on your birthday?
That's not how that works at all. That's not how that works at all.
Cold-blooded. Cold-blooded. Okay, I see. Okay, wrap it up.
All right. I got to do the math. I'll give you a gift in 6 months because you give me a gift for my half birthday. All right. So Steven came up. He had this Trello drone. I was like, oh, like I think a skill that I should have as someone who wants to learn how to fly a drone and do it to build community and possibly to help people's businesses is being able to follow something. I think the first clip I ever saw of a drone following a drift car is what really got my interest peaked. So being able to do that at some point in the future, I think would be super cool. I have friends who are into motorsports. I'm personally into it, but not financially into it. So it's kind of like combining two interests that I have and would be able to grow community. So that's one of the things I want to do. So I told Steven, you take your DJI drone, which is a GPS-based drone, which means it basically flies itself. To control this Trello, you just need your cell phone, so you don't need all the fancy setup that I have. Not that it's really fancy, but you don't need all the tools that I have. And you can kind of just tell it, move forward, go up, turn around. There's like preset buttons that you hit for it to do a flip and all that kind of stuff. So it's very like software oriented. But I just wanted him to fly in a straight line so I could fly behind him. It actually ended up being an oval. But you can see in this clip, I think he comes from my left. Yeah, so that's Steven flying in his drone. And then I arm and take off at some point. This clip is kind of long.
I just want to pause just here for a second because you just said something that I think this is what this podcast is really going to be about. I think
how many times are we going to define this podcast?
Well, it's building upon this challenging idea. I think you come up with challenges, but what you just did was explain why you're challenging yourself. Like, we didn't just randomly come up with the challenge of like, oh, it'd be cool if you followed me. Like, it's not just a challenge just of out of thin air. Like, you put a lot of thought into these challenges. And I think maybe this is a missing element of what I see it, because you're my brother and I see it all the time, but like, this is what you should be talking about a lot more. Maybe like for the YouTube content, you just say challenge, and the challenge is what the challenge is. But I think on this podcast, you go into why you're challenging yourself that way. I'm challenging myself to fly behind Steven's drone because I know at some point there might be a job, there might be an opportunity. Following something will be a task or a job, an opportunity for me to do. This is at least the step one in that direction. So the challenge is not just like a thrown up in the air challenge. It's like a thought out process. And I think this is why the learning in challenges is a unique value prop. And then the learning through teaching is like the elevated piece of that. But I think even as you're teaching somebody, you can challenge them, because I don't know if you have that footage, you were showing me, you challenged me. And I think that is a piece of the learning through challenges to get better and more efficient. Just learning rapidly through challenges. It's interesting to hear you break down the challenge, but I think that is what you should be doing on this podcast. I'm challenging myself because XYZ. This is why I thought of this challenge. This is what I think it will help me with in future. Because then you can always go back. In 6 months, if we do this and go, hey, you know what? Challenge was fun, but this really didn't help me at all. Or challenging was fun and I thought it would help me with following drift cars, but it didn't really, but it helped me do XYZ.
Yeah. While you were talking, I'm playing this in the background and I am dying laughing inside my head. Like, I don't know. When I was flying this, I was like, all right, cool. Like, I got some semblance of a shot. As I like quickly watched this in review, I was like, yeah, like I definitely followed him for a second. As I'm watching this now, like just thinking about the levels of like, if I wanted to follow a drift car, what I'd have to do. And then like, I hope that
I think it's so funny because after this, you were like, oh, we're good. I was like, you didn't even follow me.
No, I didn't record. So there was a couple of shots that were actually good that I didn't actually record because I'm dumb. But I hope that one day I get to the point where I can follow a drift car and then I can show like where it started and where it's at. That's like a meme format that's going.
That's why I said like the leveling up of these challenges. Like, you have an idea.
My gosh, it's so bad. It's so bad. It's so hilarious. All right, so just to talk you guys through, there's a fire hydrant over here that we're like, all right, we'll start here. And again, just like my flying and ability to get the drone where I want it to be is like decent at this point. My ability to control like what the camera is pointing at and have like understanding of space and being able to follow something, this was maybe like our third attempt, so it's pretty tragically bad. For now, again, like in reviewing this, I'm learning myself, so it's not completely just to show you guys how bad I am. Like, this is for my own education as well. But I should have really gone into the road and faced where Steven was about to go, because his plan was to fly like from this area. This is a fire hydrant. I know it doesn't look like it on film, but this is where he was starting, maybe like more in this area, and he was going to fly this way back to where we had just taken off at this picnic table. So why I'm positioned myself here was not thought about. It was just like, I just need to be able to see the fire hydrant, and hopefully I'll get a glimpse of his drone. I mean, this is about the quality that I'm seeing, so it's not like I have a high definition like camera or anything either. So it's pretty hard to see. But as this goes on, you can kind of see the shadow here, but with all this like video footage breakup and all this kind of stuff. But then you can see it pretty clearly if I'm above it, because it has a white top. So I'm like, okay, like again, if I was following from behind, I could have like matched his speed and not been going up and down in the air and trying to like
where that red mark would be very helpful, because
track. The mouse is just not cutting it.
I can't even see it, and I know what we're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, it's extremely hard to see even on my nice big monitor here. So I lose Steven, and I'm essentially flying backwards at this point because I hadn't thought about like actually moving and following him. I was just like, I just need him in frame. And then I was like, all right, go ahead, like start. So I lose Steven. This is us sitting on the picnic bench. Steven just flew right in front of us. And so he's like directly behind me 180 here. So I'm like, oh, shoot, like I need to flip around. And I'm like, whatever, 6 feet from him. But I'm lucky I didn't like hit him at this point. Like, oh, great. Like I'm seeing him, but I also need to not crash into the ground because I'm sideways and probably full throttle at this point. So I catch myself, I like kind of keep him in view. So there's like some glimpses of, you know, being able to control the drone. I would not say that this is like good follow footage or anything, but it's showing that like I can.
The parts that you stop, it makes it look like you actually are doing something. As soon as you hit play, it's like, oh, this is a hot mess.
Yeah, it's just all over the place. So that's what I was like, in my head, this is what I was trying to do, like just get close. And I like took this snapshot and like mentally I was like, okay, I'm following him. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still flying this drone. So I need to like pull up and do all this crazy stuff. So this second part, I was lucky I didn't hit him. This is kind of what I wanted to happen. Like go spin basically again, like 180 because he's flying directly past me and then end up right behind him. I just did it in a way that it's like way closer than I could have planned. So I almost take him out of the air again. And then if I was just a little bit lower, I would have been able to like see where he was going. And I think you actually crashed on that one.
Yeah, the wind blew me into the fence.
Yeah, into the fence. So he actually had to get up and go get it. So that's one.
Because I could see even in yours, like now that I was there the day, I see like you got thrusted pretty hard and you had to catch it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did almost crash into the front as well. That's why I went so high up into the air. So like right there, that was all the wind taking me. So I just like kind of powered out of that, and I was like, oh, okay, because it was extremely windy. Right. So we can start this over, but this is not impressive at all, and this is what I was proud of at week 6.
I know, that's what you told me. You were like, oh, I got it. I was like, no, I don't think you got anything.
No,
like,
it's not.
Some of them were maybe a little bit better, but they weren't good.
To me, again, so to put this in context, like the first flight that you saw me taking off on the Ottoman and crashing, like that looks garbage. But for me, that was a huge win. I was like, oh, the controller I bought actually works. The headset that I have, I can actually see. Like that was the biggest win.
Silver lining heavy.
Right. So that was the same mindset that I had for this. I was like, I would be ecstatic if I can even put on the headset and see Steven's drone. And that's basically what I accomplished. So as the first challenge for being able to follow...
In my definition of following is completely different.
Yeah. Well, for the first challenge to be able to like follow someone, I would say like just put the headset on. If you can see them, count that as a win. That's basically what I did here. And I'm laughing and like this is very silly, but like actually for my confidence as a drone pilot, I felt way better. That's why I told Steven, I was like, oh, we got this. Like there's no problem.
Yeah, let me preface this a little bit. I think before we went, the idea was this is not going to work at all.
We knew that this wasn't going to work.
So I think I'm expressing it from a more humorous standpoint where I go like, to me, it was funny that you said that. It was like when we started, our expectation was 0. So to see like that you did it at all and called it a success, and me then seeing that you could do it and then called it following, I was just like, oh, we're completely different. I think we both started the same place. Like this isn't going to work at all, but it just would be interesting to see if we could do this. Period. And then you did get it in view. I would say you followed it, but the idea was like to follow me. So when you were like, oh, we nailed it, I was like, I don't think first of all, I don't think I flew in any kind of pattern that you could follow, so that was already a loss. And then the fact that you like kind of saw me twice in this video was like, okay, he called that a win. But it is
so funny.
The perception of not being able to do this at all to what we did, I do think we accomplished what we set out to do. You did follow me, even though this is not good. I'm in the view most of the time. It's left, right, center, up, down, but
oh, it's so funny. So there was just to like talk about like how my mind works at the time. I didn't verbalize any of the notes that I kind of just like verbalized here watching this back. But the next time, I think after this, when I didn't record, I actually did those things. I was like, went to the street and I only followed him for like from this area to just past the picnic table, but I was like at the same elevation as Steven, moving at about the same speed. And that was like, 3 seconds of like, oh, like this is kind of what videos on YouTube look like. They're not following a Trello, which is like the slowest drone in the universe. They're not using an Acrobee, which has horrible camera quality. But it was like in my head, this is what I wanted to recreate with the tools that we had at the time, and we did it. So that's why I was like hyped on it. I was pissed when I realized I didn't actually record it. But
that was the funniest part of the day for me.
Yeah, that's how life goes. So talking about the funniest part of the day. Oh, wait.
Do you have any other footage of this day?
This is my funniest part of the day. So this was right after Steven did actually crash into the fence and had to climb the fence to grab the drone. But this Trello is really impressive video quality wise compared to my drone. I mean, you guys have been watching what my drone is. When it starts moving, it's not all that great, but like just the still image here, it's like, oh, you can see individual blades of grass. Like, how crazy.
You can make that's me and not just
right. It doesn't look like this, which is like, a 90s VHS. So this is Steven's first flight with the drone. So I mean, compared to the Ottoman, I think we do about the same thing, but this is just more impressive because the distance, like he's able to go physically farther, so it feels like he did more. He didn't have nearly the amount of things that I had to like crash into, but like when I saw him do this, I was like, oh my gosh,
I definitely didn't
he learned how to fly.
Moving like crazy. I know that's what you're yelling at me about. Disarm. I was just like full throttle.
Yeah.
Upside down in the grass.
Right. So Steven's in the grass here, no disarm. The propellers are moving a little bit, and then you disarm like well after. But the motors didn't burn out, so it's not like a guaranteed thing that it's going to happen, but just for longevity, if you don't want to keep buying new motors and all that kind of stuff. So he actually gets it up in the air. Like I said, he has a ton more room. He's probably like 20, 30 feet off the ground. So all these little mistakes, if you're doing that inside of a house, like you're immediately into a wall. But at a park where he's now like, I don't know, 50, 80 feet in the air, it's not that big of a deal. And he's able to like super catch himself and then slowly die out. I also had him fly on the simulator for all of 30 seconds. So he kind of understood how the controls work. But, and I was saying this in the last couple of live streams where it's like, it doesn't translate. Like flying in the simulator does not translate to real life for a lot of different reasons. It's a fun place to play around, but it's not like a true simulator. It's more of
just because
a
of
game.
The gravity is mostly what it is. Like you get the controls, but I think what really messed me up is playing with that tello. Like you steer with the right.
Yeah.
And with this, like you don't steer with the right. You steer with like all movements make a difference in what you're steering. Because on the tello, like you're just powered up the whole time. Like the throttle is up full, and then you're pretty much just like a regular joystick playing around with the right stick to get you to move around. But this, it's like you need to think of the amount of throttle you're giving it. Like you can't just give it all and then you're just good. So you kind of have to throttle on and off and turn, and then even the left stick, like you get to rotate the actual camera view. There's a lot more going on with this.
For sure. This was your pretend kamikaze.
I was like, oh, I see us. And then I was like, oh, we're about to run into us. So like, however fast this thing goes, 20 miles an hour is just like straight into our lap.
So again, he did it there and back, but if this is my backyard, like you're either in the woods or in my neighbor's yard, like you're just gone. So the fact that we had all this open space is like fantastic. And then he, for whatever reason, gets excited that he sees us and tries to crash into us, then realizes this is not a simulator and pulls out of it. But again, like
and realizing that I was like kind of upside down, so it was like it's just this is coming in fast.
Yeah,
I have no control over it.
For your very first time flying a drone, I would count this as like a huge success. At least way better than what I did. You could even time how long you were up in the air, like 20 seconds. That's not bad. But yeah,
I was able to turn it around. That was like a. It felt like I really accomplished something, but you look back and watch it and it's like I didn't really do anything. Just like turn the camera.
That's what I said. When you're flying it and you do like anything, especially when you have no base level, you're like, "Oh, that was amazing!" And then you watch it back, you're like, "Really? I just
watch this," and you're like,
just crashed."
Nothing. I guess I didn't do anything.
So that's the best of my 6 weeks of flying. I think week 4 was probably like the best flying that I've done. And the flying that I've done recently, I've had some memory card issues, and I was just researching it and figured out something that doesn't make any sense to me. But you can actually have too big of a memory card for these headsets. So I had like a 64 gig. What do I have in here now? That's too big. So it actually, so I had a 64 gigabyte card that I put in there. It was too big, so it would just turn off after like 10 seconds of being on. And now that I have a 32 gigabit card in there, it works perfectly fine. So I haven't been able to record any of my footage recently because I couldn't figure out what was going on. That's all part of the process though, and part of the fun. So some other problems that I'm having that I could talk about real quick. Actually, 2 little tips about the Acrobeat and these little drones, and probably drones just in general.
I think go to solo, because since you're showing stuff, it just will give you a better...
more room. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is this little yellow cord here that's just popping out. Maybe if I show the side view, you can see it better. I've been crashing this thing a lot, so I saw this come out of where it's being held currently, and I was like, oh shoot, like I cut one of the cords that either go to the camera or do something important. I powered it up and flew it, and it kind of flew okay, but I was like, oh, now I need to learn how to solder, I need to take this thing apart and like do all this stuff. But actually looking at pictures, which I need to pull up. Did I close it? No. If I pull up a picture of this Noobie drone online, you can see that this little yellow wire is just meant to stick out the way that it is. I don't know if it's an extra antenna. I don't know if it's the antenna for the video feed, and then the other antenna on the back of this thing is for the controller. Like, I don't know enough to know why it's like that, but I at least feel better knowing that it didn't rip out a cord and need to learn how to solder now. So that's nice. But with all the crashing that I've been doing, I did realize that I lost some screws in here. This screw actually over here was completely gone. So I took the screw from the back just to hold things in place a little bit longer while I'm waiting for screws. I'm not actually flying this thing at the moment. I'm waiting for the screws to come in. But that was something that I noticed where I could probably get away with flying without like the front screw here and the back screw here. But I just don't want to chance it. I am looking into buying a new drone, but I don't want to be forced to do that quite yet. So hopefully those screws come before we go up to Michigan, because I am going to try and bring this thing with me. But if not, maybe I'll just chance it, or we have some people who are into cars and other electronics, so maybe they'll have some tiny little screws. We'll find out. Yeah, so those were the 2 things that I learned about the drone. That little yellow wire just sticks out, so I need to learn exactly what that does. Screws can go missing, so maybe double check every time you go flying that your drone is all together. And the SD card for the DVR on the goggles can actually make your goggles just not work, which is weird to me, but that's the way it works out. So anything else to say from you, Steven, before I close this thing out? That was a quick hour and 10 minutes.
No, I think I'm very excited for this, and now that you're officially calling it a podcast, I think I will be interjecting more of the challenge aspect, because I do think it's the through line through your learning teaching process, and I do feel like that's a little bit more enjoyable, especially when you're breaking down why you're challenging yourself. I do like how you're kind of recapping your journey. I feel for pacing or enjoyment of watching, just having a few visual aids, I think the learning curve and the teaching curve or enjoyment curve or confidence, some kind of picture or visual, just so you can have like a measure. Because when you say, oh, I'm confident or I'm not so confident, just like having a visual piece of that will be very helpful. And that I think you should really log your time and then connect the videos with that. And then I think just like this, when you're talking about it, just go, oh, I like that clip. I'm going to pull that clip and put that on my timeline. So it doesn't have to be a full hour. It can just be like, oh, here's Nathaniel's progression. He got it here. Here's the stuff he recommends. This is what he broke. He lost the screws. Here's some, just so like from a quick glance, I kind of get an idea of what I'm getting myself into if I buy the that you're buying.
No, like a super edit of the hour-long live stream. I like that a lot. All right, well, now that we've been going for so long, thank you for anyone who watches this. I greatly appreciate you guys. Gonna go to single cam. Yeah, what's next for me? Some of the things I talked about, I am going to still try and learn how to solder. I think that's a skill I should pick up. I'm looking at new drones to pick up because I want to learn how to do more tricks. And I think while the Newbie drone is a great base platform, I'd like to get into maybe the 3-inch drone space, just something a little bit bigger, more powerful, easier to do some of those tricks with. And I'm still waiting on my Team Black Sheep transmitter. That was something that I would want to do. Maybe I'll do it next time, but show you guys the exact name of all the gears that the gear that I bought. It's all in the description down below if you want to check it out. But we can go over those piece by piece maybe next week, or I can make a video dedicated to that if anyone is asking for that. But yeah, this is me just trying to record my journey as I'm learning FPV flying. Hopefully there's some useful content in here for you guys who are just getting into it yourselves. And if you want to let me know where you guys, like what social media you use the most, you can feel free to comment that down below. I'm finding myself on Instagram and Discord a lot nowadays, just talking about this hobby and learning about it. But a big part of this for me is building community. If I can do that here with people watching me on YouTube, I'd love to. So just tell me in the comments below where you're using, what social media you're using, or where you're watching this type of content, or just which one you like to hang out on, because I'm pretty open to any of them if it allows me to interact with people that are interested in what I'm doing. So that's all I got for you guys this week. I will see you guys next week, Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But until then, see you guys around.